Activism is a way for useless people to feel important, even if the consequences of their activism are counterproductive for those that they claim to be helping and damaging to the fabric of society as a whole. The words of Thomas Sowell, one of the most preeminent intellectuals of our generation, but a man who's largely disregarded because of, well, issues of complexion. That's a subject for another day, but let's just look at the quote itself. A way for useless people to feel important, even if the consequences of their activism are counterproductive for those they claim to be helping and damaging to the fabric of society as a whole. Never has that been more evident, well, at least not in recent memory, at least not since the year of our Floyd, 2020, than what's going on in, well, the same place that everything originated in the year of our Floyd 2020, Minneapolis, Minnesota. The people are in the streets and things are rapidly spiraling out of control. A lot of people don't really see what's going on because they don't have the eyes for it. But for those of us who do have the eyes and do recognize it, it is immensely frustrating trying to reason with these folks. Logic being anathema to their very existence. Now, you know I'm going to be on point when we're doing an Orwell quote or three here in the opener. It was always the women, and above all the young ones, who were the most bigoted adherents of the party, the swallowers of slogans, the amateur spies, and nosers out of unorthodoxy. And once again, nowhere in recent memory has that been more evident than what's taking place in Minneapolis right now. It's always the shriekers with the multicolored hair and the captive bull nose rings that are out there demonstrating in favor of and for the defense of people who would rape and kill them without a second thought. Now, I don't know what it is about these women that make them so vulnerable to influence by even the most specious of reasoning. Now, allegedly, what's going on right now in Minneapolis is based around immigration, right? These same women, these same white liberal women loved Barack Obama. But the thing that people don't like to talk about anymore, especially in polite company, is that Barack Obama was the deporter in chief. Yeah, that's right. It's one of the few things that sowed dissension even among the faithful. The fact that he does remain the chief exporter, rather, of illegal immigrants of any president in history. Higher body count than any of them. And in fact, as came out this week, a little something that I'd even forgotten. Now, the picture here is fake, but the slogan, not the slogan, but the caption is 100% true. Do some digging, fact check me on everything. I'm always admonishing you guys to do that. But Tom Homan, the one that everyone loves to hate under Trump for his immigration policies and his exercise as head of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, was honored by Barack Obama, the deporter in chief at the time. But the same women you see in this photograph have turned on him and would gladly have him publicly eviscerated. But the numbers don't lie, and you can find those numbers with a 9-second Google search. Trump isn't anywhere close. And in fact, at one point early on in his first and early on in his second term as well, they were making fun of him for that fact. The fact that he hadn't lived up to Obama's export totals. I deported $21.98 a day. Try to keep up, MAGA tards. Ha ha ha. Where's the logic there? You brag on it when it favors your narrative, but then you turn right around and there's no point belaboring it. You guys already know. Once again, it was the same thing under Clinton, even as far back as Clinton. And boy, the white liberal women loved them some Bill Clinton. Some more than others, but that's the subject for another talk. In any case, what are they always saying about it? We're splitting up families. We're taking children away from their mothers. Does anyone remember this iconic photo? Cubans fleeing legitimate communism. And when it came down to a custody dispute, he dispatched federal agents with machine guns. Where's the trigger discipline is on, but to say that this is a safe method of taking a child away from their parent is to defy logic and reason with anybody with even a tangential bit of knowledge about firearms. But they loved it. They cheered it on. It's almost as if principle meant nothing to them, and still doesn't. These are the actual numbers by president, and yeah, the caption on this one's dead on correct. Maybe it's not just about numbers, maybe it's about narratives. Due process wasn't erased, just politicized. How was Obama able to deport so many? Well, because he had no pushback. There was no media ministry constantly berating his every action, double checking him on this. The procedures were exactly the same. There was just no resistance and no propaganda ministry motivating that resistance in question. So, what is it about Minnesota really? Since we've established that it's clearly not solely about immigration, that's just the cause celeb at the moment that the Trump haters are on board with. Why has Minnesota become a flashpoint? Well, the reasons are manyfold, actually. This has been something that's been going on for years, even since Trump's first term. Ilhan Omar's district, Minnesota District 5, is the leading district for FBI terror cases. That's right, boys and girls, those sweet Somalians that Jayapal from my home state is trying to tell you help build this country, even though they've only been around since the early 90s. That is the leading district for FBI terror investigations out of the entire country. Again, fact check me, do the numbers yourself. They've investigated these Somali mosques, and there's plenty of suspicious activity that we're going to get into a little bit later. There's something more going on here than just immigration, but again, that's for later on in the program. So the terror investigations, definitely a factor, and then the fraud came to light. And boy, what a fraud scandal it has been. Now, this was brilliantly put and factually accurate. The fraud has allegedly been perpetrated by members of Minnesota's sizable Somali community. Federal counterterrorism sources confirmed that millions of dollars in stolen funds have been sent back to Somalia. Let me remind you guys that they were walking this through airports, suitcases full of cash. You or I tried that with $5,000 and they'd be up our butts with an alien rectal probe, but literally millions were walked through the airport at MSP through TSA checkpoints. You know notification phone calls were made. You know people looked into it, and you know that people were told to stand down. Where they ultimately landed in the hands of terror group Al-Shabaab. The largest funder, goes the quote, of Al-Shabaab is the Minnesota taxpayer. Not just the Minnesota taxpayer, but the American taxpayer, because a lot of that stuff was federal money handed out in grants through NGOs that, thank God, St. Elon and Doge were able to bring to light and thus bring under control. But it's not just the money. It's not just the terror. It's also the votes. Let me remind you that this whining little maggot, Jacob Fry, won that mayoral election by the skin of his teeth over that fellow with the light bulb shaped head on the left, Omar Fateh. And the only reason that he was able to squeeze out the victory was because even the Somali community itself was divided. Why? Because clan allegiances are just as strong here as they were in the home country, and because Ilhan's clan wasn't in line with the clan of a lot of the voters, a lot of the Somali voters went for the white guy. Yeah, amazing how that works. Third world clan rivalries affecting American elections. Yeah, nothing to worry about, folks. Are they importing Somali voters? Oh, yeah, another one of those right-wing dog whistles, those white supremacy talking points. Well, as it turns out, there's a little more to it, because Minnesota issues driver's licenses regardless of immigration status. If you are an illegal immigrant, they will still give you a driver's license. What else do we know about state of Minnesota voting rolls? Well, they have same-day registration, and the only ID required is a driver's license. This has been going on since the days of Clinton and the early days of the motor voter bill. Oh, but it's not affecting the demographics. Certainly not. We're certainly not being invaded. Let's take a look at the Minnesota flag as it used to be. Now, this was problematic because it's depicting a white settler and a Native American being displaced, so it had to be replaced as a flag. That simply wouldn't do. This is the new Minnesota flag. I want you to take a good look at it. Just take 3 or 4 seconds of silence, process it, take a good look. This is the new flag of Minnesota. No Native Americans, no white settlers. So there's nothing problematic about it until you figure out that this is the flag of Somalia. One more time for perspective. Take a look at that. Color scheme star. 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 Now, maybe there's nothing to it, but to say that you couldn't make a case for it is just to defy reason and logic. But then again, we are dealing with the American left. Ilhan Omar has said publicly that she is a Somalian first and an American second. Don't talk to me about context. Don't talk to me about translation versus transliteration, because regardless of her speech, which is confirmed, her actions speak louder than her words. So the fraud thing, as it came up, was primarily an afterthought. All that said was where they had come up with the money for all the other factors. Where was the money for the terrorist groups coming from? Where was the money for the mosques coming from? And why was Waltz, Tim Waltz of all people, picked to run as VP under Kamala Harris? Because, quite frankly, they needed the money. Now, just the most basic level of investigation would have exposed this. And in fact, mainstream media outlets had at least dabbled into it. They'd done the work. They did the lip service, but it was one guy, a kid, for Christ's sake, that blew the lid off the damn thing. Now, some would say that this is a legacy media failure, and you could make a case for that. I would submit to you, however, that this is not a legacy media failure. This isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature, because what they serve is as a ministry of propaganda. I've said it before and I stick to it. Now, with all the Nazi references, you'd think that they would tie that as to something that Joseph Goebbels could have only dreamed of. But for the sake of political accuracy, I'd say it's got a lot more in common with Chairman Mao and the Great Leap Forward. So, you've got terror, you've got fraud, you've got crime, you've got riots in the streets, everything coming together. What are we really looking at here? Well, the word for today, Sesame Street, is brought to you today by the word anarcho-tyranny. Now, this is the dictionary definition. Anarcho-tyranny, a stage of governmental dysfunction in which the state is anarchically hopeless at coping with large matters, but ruthlessly tyrannical in the enforcement of small ones. How does this definition apply in the real world? It applies with Soros DAs being either elected or appointed into position where they turn the regular criminals loose on the streets and then deliberately punish the law-abiding, right out of the Bolshevik Revolution playbook, for any of you out there that share my historical scholarship. It applies when they pay protesters, and it's been exposed time and time again. Propaganda ministry, that's been entirely debunked by us here at the propaganda ministry, and certainly you can trust us. We wouldn't lie to you about these things. These are not organic movements. They're being presented that way to try to make you question your own judgment, to try to gaslight you, to try to isolate you, to make you think that you're the only one who feels the way that you do, refusing to ignore the evidence of your own eyes and ears. So we've got the DAs, we've got the paid protesters, and then the crime on the streets. And here's where the meat meets the grill. Crime on the streets. These Soros-appointed DAs turning these repeat offenders loose, repeat violent offenders loose, over and over and over again. Irina Zarutska, all of the other innocent civilians that have been victimized by people with sometimes dozens of violent felonies that are still walking the streets. Defunding the police, eliminating cash bail, making it utter chaos so you will beg for a lockdown. And then they employ the racial element. Again, turning us against the evidence of our own eyes and ears. Van Jones trying to tell us we don't know why that guy did what he did. when we can clearly hear him on the train surveillance video saying, I got that white girl, I got that white girl, over and over and over again. But it's not just turning loose the criminals, it's punishing the law abiding or anyone who would point out the defense of the criminals or the chaos that's taking place in the streets. I offer you Daniel Penny, stopping a madman with multiple violent felonies in his criminal history, assailing people on public transportation, putting him in a chokehold. He was still alive and breathing when the cops got there, but later died. Penny was prosecuted in a way that that DA couldn't see fit to prosecute the perpetrators of the violent crimes in the first place. And just a couple of days ago, we got to see Jake Lang get attacked in the streets. Now, he was exercising what they tell us is of pinnacle importance: the right to peaceably assemble, the right to peacefully protest the government for the redress of grievances. He was attacked by a Minneapolis mob, and the police did nothing to intervene. He barely got out with his life. Now, you say to yourself, he shouldn't have gone in there without a gun. But looking at the case of Daniel Penny, what do you think would have happened to Jake Lang if he would have quite lawfully and quite properly defended his life with a weapon and anyone would have been hurt? No, it was okay for Lang to get actually stabbed without the police intervening. But Dan, we're going to let you defend yourself. And if you really think this is about immigration, take a look at just the last couple of days. This protester, whose cardinal sin was walking through one of these demonstrations wearing a hoodie with an American flag on it. How did the crowd react? Anybody? Anybody familiar with the case? The mob told him, and I quote, "Take off the American flag and you won't get hurt." Still think this is about immigration? And just today, a group of protesters, led by none other than CNN's own Don Lemon, stormed in and interrupted a church service in progress. Still think this is about immigration? Well, if you truly believe that in your heart of hearts, I would say that the ministry of truth is more than effectively doing its job. But it's not just Minnesota, not by a damn sight. In my own home state of Washington, this fellow right here, Victor Reyes, multiple violent felon, illegal immigrant, in the country illegally with multiple violent felonies committed in the United States, in my home state of Washington. And when they went to arrest him, he drove his vehicle straight at the ICE officers and attempted to take their lives. He was put on trial for attempted murder, and the Seattle jury proudly refused to convict. Now, I'm just as in favor of jury nullification as anyone on the planet. I was actually in one corner of my heart kind of warned that a jury had actually used jury nullification. It's their constitutionally authorized power. That's not what I'm taking issue with. What I'm taking issue with is the motivation for that nullification. They basically said, we're not going to convict anyone. If they kill an ICE agent, they're going to walk. It's ideology over principle every single time. And we refuse to rise to that challenge. We continue to try to fight fair. You can't fight fair against an unprincipled enemy. In any case, the Seattle jury refused to convict Reyes and basically said quite publicly and quite proudly that any other case like this was going to walk, that they simply would not convict in any case where ICE agents are being attacked. The Somali daycares, guess what? Wasn't just Minnesota. 560 odd Somali daycares in Washington state, many of whom didn't even have a residence address. But our legislators, looking out for our best interest, they acted quickly. They acted quickly by passing an emergency bill that said that daycare records couldn't be released to the public. A reporter this week asked Kathy Wilson, newly elected mayor of Seattle and Don't even get me started on this hag. But they asked her point blank, are you planning on investigating this? She didn't even blink. No intention of investigating any of this. And it doesn't just stop there for those boys in Olympia. No, sir, not by a damn sight. They moved to lock down all the public records with regard to the daycare fraud that was taking place in the state of Washington that rivaled, if not exceeded, what was going on in Minnesota. The only saving grace that we have in my home state is that we don't have the size of the Somali population. But they haven't stopped there. Not in my home state. The latest thing they put in front is to make it to where sheriffs are no longer an elected office. That the governor can intervene and have a sheriff removed, subject to appointment or special election if he doesn't like their politics. This is a violation not only of the United States Constitution, but the Washington State Constitution as well. Odds are this is the first you're hearing of it. Yeah. You gotta love a mayor like this. Doesn't he just strike you as that alpha male? Doesn't he just strike you as having that strong masculine energy, truly looking out for the interests of his people? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, you call it a communist. They don't have any problem with authoritarianism. The only problem they have with authoritarianism is the fact that currently they're not the ones in charge. And God forbid they get their hands on the switch again, they will wreak an unholy vengeance, the likes of which has never been seen. Folks, it's time to just call it what it is. We are in the early days of a civil war. We have had our bleeding Kansas. We have had our Fort Sumter moment, or are having it in the city of Minneapolis right now. But here's the thing about that civil war. People have the wrong idea about the way this next civil war is going to roll. This isn't going to be blue coats and gray coats marching onto a battlefield with privately owned artillery pieces. This isn't going to be Mason-Dixon lines. It's going to have no resemblance whatsoever to the first American Civil War. It's not even going to be as clean and delineated as the Spanish Civil War under Franco. No, sir. No, ma'am. It's going to look a lot more like the Syrian Civil War, with troubles between factions in the same urban area. It's going to look a lot more like the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Catholics fighting Protestants, secular fighting religious. It's going to look a lot more like the trouble in the Balkans, Sarajevo. And bet your ass there is going to be plenty of the attendant levels of the equivalent of ethnic cleansing, even though that cleansing is not going to break down as much along ethnic lines as it will along political and spiritual lines. Now the left, disingenuous as they are, they would tell us to come together. They want us all to come together and reach across the aisle. They want bipartisan work. Let's look at our common interests. Let's look at the things that unite us. They'll quote Mandela: if you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner. I will remind you that their much lauded Nelson Mandela was a murderous, violent terrorist. Nelson Mandela was not the pioneer of bloodless revolutions. His African National Congress gave us necklacing. For those of you unfamiliar with what necklacing is, give it a 9-second Google search. And if you think that that's not what they have in store for us if they ever get their hands back on power, guess again. It won't go from zero to necklacing overnight, but you can bet that the people who were willing to set entire cities on fire and call it mostly peaceful will spare no expense, spare no effort, and spare no bloodshed in exacting their vengeance. And meanwhile, we still want to hang on to principles and fight fair. What was it Mandela said? If you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner. I've got a few retorts to that, and they're going to come rapid fire, so try to keep up. I would quote David Horowitz: there can be no peace with someone who wants to kill you. Remember, these were the people that only 4 years ago wanted your children taken from you and you put in camps for refusing a poisonous jab at the end of a government mandate. I would quote Ramon Magsaysay, between our life and communism, there can be no peace, no paralyzing coexistence, no gray neutralism. There can only be conflict, total and without reconciliation. And to take it to the religious end, I would quote Charles Colson: when it comes to the culture, there's no such thing as peaceful coexistence. If we're not defending truth, fighting for Christian values in all of life, the truth will be sacrificed on the altar of mainstream secularism. I would quote St. Cosmas of Aetolia: they will ask you for your rifles. Have two. Give them one and keep the other. One rifle will save 100 souls. I would quote Orwell and remind them that people sleep peaceably in their beds at night only because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. It's time for us to rise up and be those rough men. And if we stand on principle and stand in strength and walk in the light of God's truth, I would close with this. From Archon the Serbian: we can defeat anyone, even the entire world. I am not afraid of anyone or anything. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself? No. The only thing we have to fear is our own cowardice, our own weakness, our own unwillingness to call something what it is, to put your chin down, your knuckles up, and take the fight to the enemy for once, at long last. Show them what it looks like when we really become what they have accused us of. We can sort out the tears after. There'll be plenty to go with the blood. The opinions expressed by the Reverend are his own and no one else's on the planet. Not friends, not foes, not supporters, not detractors, not sponsors. And I cannot stress this enough, certainly not employers, because I really dig the one that I'm at right now. In any case, that last warning goes out for the sake of you docs, happy Antifa maggots. Give it your best shot. It's not going to work. The aforementioned opinions have been adjudicated thought crime in all jurisdictions. Consider yourself warned. They are coming from the heart. They are guided by the mind. They are guaranteed to stretch open that unwilling maw and choke you with fistful after fistful of truth cock until your eyeballs rupture or you open them and you see the light. And either way, mission accomplished. Spewing hate facts at dataphobes since 1969. It is the Reverend. Welcome back, boys and girls. It is time once again for the Sunday Servant. Welcome aboard. Gonna take a look over here. We're gonna do a real quick roll call and rundown. Got a lot of good stuff going on today. We're gonna enjoy it right now. Where's the fire, people? Everybody in for the drum roll. Here we go. Hard charging out of the starting gate as we come reeling and rocking damn near every single Sunday, with a few notable exceptions to the strains of Red Desert gut stomping rock and roll band from the smoldering embers and crumbling ruins of the once great American city, the aforementioned Minneapolis, Minnesota. The name of the band is Red Desert. Name of the track is Older No Wiser. Every week I get a little bit older. Every week you guys get to decide if I've gotten any wiser. Some weeks I do better than others. I'm kind of feeling it this week. Let's see how it pans out. Jumping on in. Oh, look at that. The lovely Miss Charlie taking the gold. Nice to have you aboard, sweetheart. Followed immediately by the OG Sinner sister herself, the divine Miss Emmy. Good to see you, sweetheart. David getting here early, man. Good to see you, old friend. It is a good thing to have you on board. Preacher George, good seeing your input on social media during the week, and I always look forward to you joining the show here on Sundays, brother. It is a damn good thing to have you aboard. OG Reverence Ranger and Prophet of Doom, Mr. Dennis Weimer, going all the way back to the early 90s. Good to have you on board. Tell your mom I said hi. It's a damn good thing to have you here. Look at that. We got Carry On before Roman, but that means that Roman is floating around here somewhere. Anyway, man, good to have you. Good to have you both on board. Glad to see that you guys can make it out. Of course, from opiumtales.com. Some of my oldest and dearest friends over there, man. There's Roman. I knew we'd find him. Did I miss it? I saw Deacon Mark somewhere. There's the man. Deacon Mark on the back porch with Ida, enjoying some adult sodas and some smokable consumables. I'm kind of craving a cigarette myself, if I'm being honest right now, but I'm trying to be a good boy, Deacon Mark. Really, really trying to be a good boy. So I'm going to pass. In any case, man, glad you made it, brother. Glad you made it for sure. And yes, great minds think alike. Check it out, Clem. Yes, sir, brother. Yes, sir. Glad to have you here, brother. All of the usual suspects showing out early. Brother Sonny, man, guys, if you did not catch his Let Us Attend broadcast after the unfortunate happenings of Renee Good, I recommend that you go back and catch the replay. I know some of you guys were there for that. He was laying down some truth and laying down some wisdom, man, and giving a lot of people, myself included, pause to reflect on the way that we were taking it all in. We don't always agree on everything, man, but the one thing you can count on with Brother Sonny is that he is going to speak the truth, brother. If it's short dicks every cannibal on the Congo and hair lips every hillbilly on Buck Creek, he is going to let you know what the truth is without equivocation or apology. And that is one of the many, many things I love about that crazy Russian. Glad you made it out, brother. I'll be seeing you here in a couple of weeks down in Austin. I am looking forward to that learning opportunity. So yeah, what do you say we get it started? Gone through the whole roll call. All the usual suspects are here. While we have still got the bumper music rolling, I'm going to go ahead and start fading that on out. Once again, guys, that bumper music, Red Desert, everybody seems to enjoy that. Dude, they're a great band. They really are. And they've been letting me use this. That track, Older No Wiser, I've been using it as bumper music now for going on 6 years. You know, I'll be doing this. It'll be 6 years coming up in April that I've been doing this damn thing. Started out as just a way for me to vent my COVID frustrations. And now here we are, 6 years later, still doing it. But Red Desert, man, they have let me use this as bumper music without asking for royalties or kickbacks or anything like that. So take care of the people who take care of the program and download some of their music and pay for it. That for the sake of the Napster generation there. But download some of their music, buy some of their merch. They're a good band, dude. They really are. And one of these days, hopefully, with any luck and good fortune, I'll be able to see them live. Probably not in their hometown of Minneapolis at the rate things are going, but hopefully I'll be able to take in a live set before this whole thing's over with. In any case, sponsor shout outs real quick. Let's knock that out and let's just jump into this stuff, shall we? Of course, first and foremost, Brother Roman, one of my oldest and dearest friends on the planet, over at opiumtales.com. You can check him out at opiumtales.com. You can check him out on Substack, where he is laying down the wisdom over there. Beautiful watercolor work of tastefully done, beautiful naked women, and testosterone-driven commentary on Planet Bart. We call that a trifecta. He is handling his business. Check him out on Substack. Check him out at opiumtales.com. And check him out on Amazon as Roman Riva. He's got Roman Freely. He discontinued From Dork to Pimp Daddy. That one's out of circulation now, but he's still got Roman Freely, which is a collection of his watercolor work, and he's got some short fiction happening over there on Amazon as well. Roman Riva is the name that you're going to want to look for over there. And big shout out as well to my Viking brothers, Casey and Dusty Tellison, over at Nordic Smoke Barbecue, the only legit barbecue in the Inland Northwest. Period, bar none. Sit down, shut up, you're wrong. They're it. The long ship. The smoker trailer is out sailing the asphalt seas, kicking off that catering season. They're doing gigs up there, and provisions are being made. We're way ahead, man. Go ahead and get it in the pipeline early. If you are in the Spokane area, get out and check them out. Check them out on all the social media platforms. And Dusty has pretty much taken over the pitmaster responsibilities over there. Casey has passed the bar, moved on to bigger and better things. He is now an attorney in the state of Washington. I've got him on retainer. You should too. That is Casey Tellison. Look him up. And whatever your legal needs are, handle that business. He's got a book on Amazon as well. Beyond being just a hell of a human being, he is also a combat vet, a Marine, a machine gunner, and he's got a book on Amazon called Freaks of a Feather, published by Latop Press out of Spokane, Washington. It is a combat memoir that began as a suicide note. What more lead do you need than that? He is a phenomenally gifted writer and a dear friend and a fine human being. Any of the guys over here in the comments that have read the book, they will tell you, and you can find that book on Amazon. Take care of the people that are taking care of me, taking care of the program. This is all about building community, man. You got to remember, when the balloon goes up, nobody's coming to save you, man. Nobody's coming to save you. And if you haven't built a community, if you're like, oh yeah, man, well, I'm kind of a lone wolf. Cool, man. We'll be splitting up your gear. Okay. You're not that tough. Nobody is. You know, the tough guy act may play on Facebook, and it may play to your circle when you're on the mats at BJJ or whatever. When the balloon seriously goes up, it expressed as a fractional equation, it means precisely shit over. That's what it means. So yeah, don't you're not going to make it on your own. Build that community. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Look out, seek out for like minds and kindred spirits. Build that community. If you're going to be tossing your money at somebody, try to toss it to a like mind or a kindred spirit. Man, we have got to look out for each other, because you can bet the folks on the other side are definitely looking out for their own interests, and they are capable of overlooking all kinds of discrepancies to pull together in their common drive to dismantle America and dismantle Western civilization. So if you got a slight difference of opinion with one of your brothers over here, cool. Talk about it over a cup of coffee and continue to support your brother. Okay, that's what we're trying to build here, and that isn't just lip service. I mean this stuff when I say it. So that's that. Um, God bless every one of y'all for showing up. I appreciate you being here. Things are getting thick, man, and I'm going to be bringing up a couple of things that perhaps, and again, theoretically, um, okay, yeah, it's theoretical, okay, but I'm going to point out some things and some observations and throw out a couple of ideas, and you see if it's got legs. Now, what's going on in Minnesota right now has created some differences of opinion, even within my circle. The one good thing that I can say is that everyone who is in my circle that comes to a different conclusion, I know that they arrived at their position honestly, that they looked at a given set of facts, that they processed it, that they thought about it critically, they weighed the pros and the cons. They applied their internalized biases to it, because we all have them, and but they didn't let cognitive dissonance get in the way. They gave it a fair day in court, and this was the conclusion that they came to. Right? Sometimes we're going to come to different conclusions. It's perfectly okay. But if you're just shutting people out, right? If you're just shutting an idea down because it doesn't fit the narrative that you had in mind, even though this guy may be making a good case, you are being intellectually dishonest. And the two things that probably appall me more than anything else on the planet: ideological inconsistency, right? That is to say, inconsistencies in your logical processes regarding your political or social ideology, and intellectual dishonesty. It's one thing to tell a lie, it's another thing to know that you're telling a lie and to intellectually process the mechanisms to tell that lie when you know better, to create a rationalization in your head that you know what you're saying is not true. You know that. But you are going to create this hashtag intellectual gymnastics. Let me see if I've still got that as a hashtag on my pro screen right here. Yeah, you're going to create the hashtag intellectual gymnastics to make it truth in your head for purposes of conveying that narrative that you know to be false. You've run it through your logic filter. You know better. I know that you know better, but you're going to lie to my face anyway. Intellectual dishonesty is just one of those things I won't abide. I just won't abide it anymore. Ideological inconsistency can be corrected. It's almost a difference between ignorance and stupidity, or ignorance and willful blindness. Ignorance can be corrected. You give people the proper amount of information, they can come to a more enlightened conclusion, right? If they're willfully blind and just being deliberately blind by way of intellectual dishonesty, there's no fixing that, and morally that's just reprehensible. you know you you don't want to lie, right? You definitely don't want to be egregious and deliberate in the mechanisms of your lying. That takes it to a whole new level of reprehensible. As far as I'm concerned, your mileage may vary. But what do you say we just jump into this right now? I'm going to take it back over. I'm going to need to get back to that screen in a second. But for right now, let's see what I missed. Here we go. Dark quote for reflection. Solzhenitsyn said, without asceticism, the democracy is no better than socialism or communism. Absolutely. 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 And yeah, definitely. What do we got? Another one here. Maybe it is time for a deeper class into darker territory of asymmetric warfare. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna advocate. I'm not gonna advocate one way or the other on that. I would like for my thoughts on those kind of subjects to sort of remain vague and mysterious. I kind of like having people not really knowing where I stand on issues like that. It's lulls them into a false sense of security. I can't even finish that with a straight face. But yeah, brother, I'm glad you made it in at least for a minute, and feel free to jump in. And that's for everyone. I want everybody to stay engaged over here in the comments, just to make sure that we've got a lively conversation going. That means punching in for whatever difference of opinion, kudos, reflections of stuff that maybe I'm not analyzing properly or thoroughly. Participate, people. Y'all didn't just come here to hear me ramble. I want this to be a conversation. You've heard me say before, the vibe that I want when you guys come out for this is we're all sitting around a cafe somewhere. It would be better if it were outside and we could smoke, but um, but I want that to be the vibe that we can all sit around and engage. And so that's where we're going with that. All right, what do you say we jump into it? Civil wars. Gettysburg, Syria, the Balkans, and Minnesota. Is there anyone here that would disagree that while we may not have gone fully kinetic, that we are in a state of political affairs right now that does rise to the level of civil war? Keep in mind, I keep coming back to the historical references. Everybody's like, "Oh, dude, we know it for Civil War." They'd be like, factions fighting in the street, right? A lot of people either aren't historical scholars at all, or their level of historical scholarship maybe isn't where it needs to be, particularly with American history. And I understand that, particularly if you went to public school prior to, if you went to public school prior to the 90s, you've got a little bit better take on it. Some of us older folks got the benefits of what it was before the Department of Education really sort of federalized public education into an indoctrination center based on the Prussian model, but with left wing politics to go along with it. They don't, when you hear Civil War, one word, right? Go ahead. You guys know what it is over in the comments. When they boil down everything about the Civil War, it comes down to one word. What is that word, guys? For the bonus round, what is the one word? Civil War. The S word, you got it. Slavery. That is correct. And by the way, I want to say too, you guys that are watching on YouTube, I will see all of your comments over here, the YouTube guys. If you're watching on Facebook, it's a coin toss. Okay. Sometimes the Facebook comments show up and sometimes they do not. I think Brett was trying to comment a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't seeing his comments, and he hit me with a message later. He was like, did you see my comments?" And no, I hadn't. And he had been on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, hey, cool, thanks for being there on that platform, but I may not see your comments. So if you're making something that you think is profound and you see me look over here and you think I'm ignoring you, I'm not necessarily. I could be, but I'm not necessarily ignoring you. It just sometimes doesn't come through over here. Now, here's the thing. Of course, everybody, it comes down to, right? What did Dennis say? Slavery. Slavery. Bang, bang. That's what everybody thinks. Now, David is going to get crafty on me. David's going to get crafty on me because he knows he's got a little bit more. He's got a little bit more historical wisdom in his hip pocket. He's going to say economics, right, which is also accurate. Some people would say states' rights. Some people would say supremacy of federal over state law. Any number of things. But if you asked 100 people to boil down, tell me about the Civil War in one word, right? They would either list a battle, Gettysburg, Antietam, Kings Mountain for you Carolina people, um, but 92 out of 100 are going to say slavery, right? Of course, there's a lot more to it than that. The public schools have not done their job. But even leaving all of that aside for the sake of discussion, when people think about the Civil War, and yes, thank you, Roman. Thank you, Roman. Oh yeah, no, Dennis, I wouldn't sell you short like that. I know you're smarter than that. Yeah, you're responding to the question. That most people would say that. Yeah, no, I get it, bro. Come on, you're. We go way back, Dennis. I trust your intellect. Not that slavery is not in there, right? I get it, David. But yeah, being specificity counts. Specificity. That's my college word. I got like three of those. Anyway, thank you, Roman, for reminding everybody to smash the like button. Um, we have an image in our heads that when civil war comes together that there are going to be clear moments where we know, and people don't know about the bleeding Kansas phase that took place. They don't know about the Missouri Compromise. They don't know about all of the things that led up to this moment. In the same sense that when we discuss the American Revolution, people forget that it was years, okay, between the Boston Massacre and another event. It was years between the Stamp Act and this thing. It was years between, the Boston Tea Party and the Declaration of Independence. It was years between. This is it could happen bang overnight, and we're right in the middle of it. But the likelihood is no, right? The Missouri Compromise, Bleeding Kansas, all of the things that led up to Fort Sumter, and even when Fort Sumter happened, a lot of people were like, "Yeah, we're still going to be able to pull this back from the brink. It's one thing. It's just one thing. That's it. Come on, yeah." Trivia question: How many people were killed at Fort Sumter? How many people were killed at Fort Sumter, and under what circumstances? Sound off in the comments if you know. I'm going to go ahead. Spoiler alert: so only one got killed, and it was an accident. It was an accident loading a cannon, if memory serves. That was the only guy that got killed. So even then, they weren't so sure that we were in a civil war. Even the first battle of the Civil War, people had brought their families out. They brought picnic lunches. They thought the armies were going to march onto the field, and there were going to be maybe a skirmish or two, and then everybody was going to, the really heavy negotiations, and then everybody was going to go home. That's how much they believed. That was their confirmation bias. That was their normalcy bias. But moreover, it was their belief in the nation. That somehow we would be above all this. That somehow we were still going to be able to hold it together. And that's the impression. That's why when you mention Civil War in front of people, they're very, no, come on, man, we're not there yet. Okay, maybe we're not Antietam yet. Maybe we're not even Bull Run. First or second, doesn't matter. Maybe we're not Bull Run yet. I think we're definitely through Bleeding Kansas. I think we're definitely through Missouri Compromise territory. And we are seeing a clear and distinct division. But even that is misleading. When people think of the Civil War, they think like this, man. They think that it's going to be blue coats and gray coats, and people are going to roll their militias out into the streets, or maybe there's going to be, there's going to be a clear line that whole territories are going to break off, and that Washington, Oregon, and California are going to become a three-state alliance, and God forbid. And, it's the odds are it's not going to break down like that, people. It's not. You're going to see things that have a lot more in common, not even with the Spanish Civil War, right? Spanish Civil War, it was two clear political factions. I don't even think you have that here necessarily, right? Now, you have it on the left, as I have lamented at length before, this unholy alliance where you have the alphabet people and radical Muslims who, as part of religious doctrine and political policy, cut the heads off of the alphabet people, but they can overlook that for the sake of their common goal of dismantling the West and bringing down the United States. They can overlook that. Meanwhile, over here, professing Christians want to butt heads because our Mormon brethren have some magic underwear, and we can't get past that. In any case, there's going to be a number of different factions. There's going to be a number of different tribes, for lack of a better word, and it's going to be neighbor against neighbor, sometimes neighborhood against neighborhood. There are a few historical examples that I want to touch on. The first one I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with the Troubles. You guys know how much it breaks my heart, brother wars, because of my devotion to our blood as Europeans. It breaks my heart because whole generations of our people have been largely decimated for the sake of wars that were not even for our interest. That's a historical debate for another time, but let's talk about the Troubles in Ireland. Now, if you look it up, they'll tell you that the Troubles was a 30-year ethno-nationalist and political conflict in Northern Ireland. A little bit deeper than that. Nationalists and Republicans, Sinn Féin, the IRA, Ulster Protestants, and the Ulster Defence Association, they were the ones that wanted Ireland to remain as part of the UK. Right. Now, looking at where the UK is now, about to be overwhelmed and largely taken over by Islam, probably wouldn't have been the best move. But they wanted it to remain. They wanted Northern Ireland to remain within the UK. And then, of course, you had the British Army that were there to just put a lid on it and just come in and smack everybody down and get everybody back in line and return everything to their version of normalcy. But what you wound up with were acts of terror, restaurant bombings, car bombings, families walking down the street, just having another gray, rainy day. Boom! Now you got body parts all over the street over a difference in religious doctrine. Gun ownership wasn't as much of a factor over there. They knew how to build bombs, and when they did get their hands to weapons, they were usually military-grade weapons. And there were pitched battles fought between factions of the Irish and the British Army. Brother killing brother. Same bloodline, sometimes the same families. Killing each other. There was no normality to anybody's daily routine throughout the process of it. The only normality of it, and here's the really twisted part, is that it became so normal for a restaurant or a car or a church to just blow up that after a while you're numb to it. It becomes background noise. Now imagine the historical ramifications of that, where you have literally decades of that sort of factional fighting, where you know some of the people that you're actively fighting against. Maybe some of them are extended family even. and trying to go back to normal, quote unquote, after all of that. And it'll be even more so when I get to the conflict in the Balkans. We're already at that ideological split, leaving the religious element to the side for a minute. For all the grief that I give people about not being able to put their slight doctrinal differences aside, I think that when the balloon really goes up, you will see a split between, I won't even say between believers and non-believers, but you'll see a split clearly between Muslims and everyone else. Okay. Leftists will adhere to their bloodthirsty terrorist brethren, as they always do, and it's going to be nasty. It's going to be very, very nasty. But here's the thing: those factions already exist, and we can see it plain as day. Keep in mind, and I'm not being hyperbolic here, these were people, and this is why the people who are in control and have their hand on the switch as far as power and the enforcement of the law becomes so very important. Because it was only 5 years ago that you had people, we all had people that we knew that publicly and out loud voiced their opinion that anyone who didn't do what the government told them to do, i.e., getting the jab, should have their kids taken away. Oh, well, they didn't really mean it. How many times, guys? How many times? They didn't really mean that. It certainly couldn't happen here. How many times do I have to, again, take us back into history when the Berlin Wall came down and all the records came out that as many as 1 in 3 East German citizens had worked with the Stasi at one point or another? How many times do I have to bring up the fact that Spokane Police Department had to put out a public service announcement telling people to stop dialing 911 because their neighbors weren't wearing masks? Dialing 911 that they had too many people in their house or they weren't social distancing. Can't happen here. It already has. The factions already exist. They're already there. And sometimes they live right next door to each other. Roman. What do we got? Roman. We're no longer friends with someone we went overseas with because he wanted us dead. Yeah, exactly. My entire family called us conspiracy theorists for not getting the jab. Never got an apology. Needless to say, we're distant. Yeah. Don't tell me to be civil. My side, my faction, just wanted to be left alone. We didn't want to hurt anyone. We weren't refusing the jab in spite of what they told us because we wanted grandma to die. We weren't refusing the jab because we wanted the disease to spread and for children to be, injured. That we disagree. Leave us alone. The other faction, if they had the political stroke, would have had you gulagged or dead. They would have had legitimate law enforcement. I say legitimate. They obviously wouldn't be by practice at that point. They wanted real cops to take your kids away, seize your house. Do you think that mentality has gone away? Do you think for a second that they are any less driven to crush everything that you represent and everything that you hold dear the second they get their hands on the mantle of power? Do you think that these same people who wanted your kids taken away, who wanted you forbidden to work, who wanted you isolated and imprisoned in your own house, and who in some cases wanted you gulagged or dead, you think that they won't follow through with that? You're kidding yourself. And these are the same people now who are like, what about the rights of... I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Some people would draw the equivalency of that the people going in and enforcing this federal law are just as bad as the people who would be coming around to enforce a jab mandate. I see where you could make the case. Here's where I profoundly disagree. We're talking about the rights of U.S. citizens versus the non-existent right of people who are not here legally and in many, many cases have committed crimes. You can accuse me of being a bootlicker for not standing in the face of this horrible... What tyranny is there here? Is this exercising some extra constitutional mandate? Is this something that they didn't have the power to do as delineated in the Constitution of the United States? As of now, is it? In spite of the opinions of several leftist activist judges that keep getting overruled, no, it is not. And I submit to you that if you don't believe that I would call out something that was flat out unconstitutional, if such a step were to be taken, then you and I probably have nothing further to discuss. I wonder where all that energy was. Suddenly the concern for the sanctity of people's, records and privacy and the overreach of federal... I wonder where that energy was in 93 in Waco. I wonder where all that energy was in 91 at Ruby Ridge. Oh, Bart, but that's different. Yeah, it is different. And I'm gonna admit something here that you're not gonna get from the other side. It's different because you agreed with what the government was doing. Now you could make the same case right back at me. I'm only okay with this because I agree with what the government is doing in this instance. You could make that case. You would be incorrect. But I could see where, as an outside observer, you would say, well, yeah, man, you're just, you were all bucking up, over Ruby Ridge. You were all bucking up over Waco, man. But now you're just like totally okay with them just running. If you're trying to draw the equivalency between people in remote North Idaho who just wanted to be left alone and a guy got entrapped into committing a violation, and the only thing that escalated it was the fact that he refused to be a snitch for the feds, and that justified a full military use of force, you're really going to equate that with pulling child sex offenders out of homes in a country where they had no right to be in the first place. You're seriously going to look me in the face and try to equate Waco, Texas, where a group of people living in rural Texas, in what amounted to their church, who had committed no federal crimes whatsoever, who hadn't hurt anyone, and all of whom were American citizens, you're going to equate that with law enforcement operations going after murderers, rapists, child sex traffickers. I submit to you, sir or madam, that if you're going to try to draw that equivalency, you and I have nothing further to discuss. But what does it come down to ultimately? You're going to back the play because you agree with it. I'm not encumbered by that level of intellectual dishonesty. If I feel like there is a policy or procedure that has overstepped the bounds of the Constitution, I'll call it out. Even if I may agree with the overreach, I'm still at least going to call it out. I've got the balls to say to you, yeah, what he did was a total breach, and I'm here for it. If it comes to that, you'll get that level of honesty from me. I give you my word. You won't get that from the other side. In any case, there are some similarities with the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Then you've got Syria. And this started all the way back in 2011. 2011, refresh my memory, was that still Hafez al-Assad or had Bashar? Somebody want to fact check that for me real quick? I think by 2011, Hafez al-Assad had handed it off to Bashar al-Assad at that point in 2011. Somebody want to fact check me on that? In any case, Bashar wasn't having it. The Assad regime was backed by Hezbollah and also backed by the Russians. Odd bedfellows, certainly. Syrian National Army, the Kurds, and ISIS. Al-Qaeda and al-Nusra. You want to talk about factional infighting. The Syrian civil war was the worst of all possible scenarios, and all the more reason why we should have never gotten involved. We knew that the Islamic extremists that we were arming were Islamic extremists. We decided to call them moderates. And a lot of the weapons and equipment, including trucks, in a very high-profile incident, there was an American auto dealer or landscaper or something that saw his company truck in Syria being used by the rebels. We backed a faction because we wanted to see Assad unseated. In the same sense that when things kick off here and the balloon goes up, you are going to see foreign entities, and possibly already are. You're going to see foreign entities that are going to back one faction or another here in the States. That unholy alliance between the political left and radical Islam will have foreign support as this thing escalates. I guarantee you. Probably already does. The number of people that cross that border under Joe Biden from Middle Eastern nations, completely unvetted. We don't know how many sleeper cells we have operating right now. We know they're here. We know they are operating. We don't know how many and we don't know where. And then, of course, you also have to think in terms of fifth generation warfare. As we've discussed here on the program before, the Chinese are adversarial to the interests of the United States. During that period of wide open borders under Biden, there were districts along our southern border that had more Chinese immigrants coming across month over month than they did Mexicans. Does China strike you as the kind of place that you can just leave if you're not happy there? Right. So if you've got single military-age men crossing our southern border, that means that they got to Mexico. First of all, were allowed to leave China to make it to Mexico and then cross that southern border because it was wide open. What do you suppose is happening there? Fifth generation warfare, hybrid warfare. You have sleeper cells in the United States waiting to be activated. And when we get more into what's going on in Minnesota right now, I'm going to bake your biscuits a little bit with that knowledge. Too many factions, all with their same interests. But when it kicks off here, you are going to have foreign involvement. You are going to have foreign support. For the leftist and Islamic factions, you are going to have support from the Chinese communists and from Islamic radicals in other countries. Again, it's already happening. You're saying to yourself, I'm being alarmist. You're saying to yourself that I'm being hyperbolic. Go back and read the Substack that I wrote probably a year ago now on it all being a matter of numbers. One single sleeper cell can do a hell of a lot of damage. And if you think it's only one, don't kid yourself. They're here, they're armed, they're waiting. And when that trigger is pulled, there's no looking back. Brace yourselves, boys and girls. It's going to be a fun little ride. We could wind up with something as complex as the Syrian civil war. That many factions, some of which have overlap and some of which have violent opposition, and that status can change from one day to the next. That is an absolute worst case scenario for the sake of this country. But that's the Syrian civil war. Contrasting that with the troubles in Northern Ireland, I think the most likely outcome here is going to be the Balkan crisis, the former Yugoslavia, when that all broke out. The factions there largely separated by ethnic and religious ties. In the most likely scenario here in the United States, it would align most closely with what happened in the former Yugoslavia. The factions are going to divide along religious lines and along ethnic lines. Will there be racial skirmishes? Will there be factions of militant whites fighting factions of militant blacks? It's going to happen. Yes. Not advocating that. I'm just telling you historically that's what's coming. But again, that religious breakdown, not necessarily a fight between Christian nationalists and Muslims per se, but the fact that the radical left has aligned itself so closely with Islam, and the Islamic faction does now and will further have support from outside the country as this thing escalates. There will be factional conflicts between people with the values that are understood as Christian nationalists fighting this unholy allegiance between the political left and Islamic insurgents. These are the ways that it's going to break down. It will not be North versus South. It will not be Pacific Northwest versus the Republic of Texas, much as I love the Lone Star. There probably will be some alliances between states. We could see entire states breaking off and seceding. We could see Canadian provinces, with everything they've got going on, breaking off and becoming part of the alliances here in the United States. Alberta, I'm looking at you. These are things that could happen. These are the prospects. But the very term Balkanization is why I'm saying it's got more to do with what's happening in, or what had happened in the former Yugoslavia. Those factions eventually break completely away from each other. There's no more living together and going along to getting along. I can immediately tell when I am not having a conversation with a serious person when I hear the words leave their mouth, diversity is our strength. That is the most moralizing, fallacious, ridiculous assertion that I've ever seen become accepted as common knowledge. There's no empirical evidence to support that, and a mountain of empirical evidence to the contrary. Stop the hate, separate. What do you mean by that? I mean what will ultimately happen in an American Civil War scenario. Whether it's a political faction, whether it's a religious faction, whether it's a racial faction. Ultimately, in-group tribal alliances conquer everything. Am I cheering for that? No. Do I wish that the world were different? Absolutely. But we have the entire track record of history to reflect on. And not once in that entire track record will you ever see the case of diversity being a strength supported by the historical outcome when it comes to civil conflict. Not once. What is that? It's usually wrong. It has never been true, right? Tell me the name. Why do I always draw a blank? Damn it. Every time I go to bring it up, I draw Putnam. Putnam. Look up Putnam's research on diversity. He was a hardcore leftist and he went out looking for it. He went out looking for evidence that diversity was our strength. He ran the same set of studies 3 separate times, and every time the end result was the predictable end result, was that it eroded trust in communities, destroyed social cohesion, and because he was a leftist, he put off publishing it for years. Putnam, what is this? Dennis, somebody help me out. Putnam diversity study. Robert Putnam, I want to say. I try not to Google cheat because you get in the habit of Google cheating, you start losing pockets of your memory, but sometimes it's best. Oh, while we're here, before I segue into the next thing, I want to do this as an experiment. I had meant to do this last week, right? I'm about to do something, and there's a point to what I'm doing, and I neglected to come back to it. I want you guys to take a look here. What do you count? Count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little tablets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little Indians. Okay? Cheers. This will be important later. We'll come back to it. Remind me. 5. It was Robert Putnam? Cool. Right on. Right, George. Yeah, it did great in Africa, didn't it? George, it's good that you brought up that example because that's what really puts their theory to the test. We are constantly told in white countries that are populated primarily by white people of European descent, that diversity is our strength, that the only way that we have a diversity crisis, and the only way to fix that is by flooding those countries with people from the third world, with people from cultures that are completely incompatible with ours, right? Always good when they're flooding our countries. Diversity is a strength. When we go into their countries, our diversity is violent European colonialism. And I would like to remind the people in Africa right now, particularly the former European colonies over there, by the time this is over with, they will beg to have the Europeans back. Because here's the thing, unlike Rhodesia, okay, and we will continue to call it Rhodesia, we will not use the Z word in my house. Unlike the days of European colonialism, the Chinese will not be guilted. The reason why Rhodesia got abandoned, the reason why apartheid South Africa got abandoned for the sake of the African National Congress, had everything to do with white European guilt. Simple as that. All the former colonies, we didn't lose our hold on them because we didn't have the resources or the wherewithal to continue being a colonial power in those regions. The French could have held on to Algeria, probably not Indochina, but the French definitely could have held on to Algeria, right? The British and the Dutch could have hung on to Rhodesia. The British and the Americans could have put their weight behind apartheid in South Africa. We got abandoned because communist insurgents trained by the Chinese and the Soviet Russians, those warlords started usurping the colonial powers, and rather than look at it as them trying to knock out the West, which is what it was communist regimes, including Soviet Russians and the Chinese, that were trying to take power away from the Western powers, the European powers. It was a conflict. They were trying to take our holdings. And rather than look at it like that, we took it as the natives wanting control over their own affairs. Nothing could have been further from the truth. When the people of sub-Saharan Africa are in control of their own affairs, you tell me how it looks. It is the most resource-rich continent on the planet, and it is wasted because they can't hold up the infrastructure. Very similar situation in Venezuela. Again, you're dealing with equatorial peoples. They can't manage the infrastructure. Well, Bart, that's not racial, that's cultural. Okay, sure. It's cultural. Doesn't change the outcome, does it? If you want to disregard the bell curve and say it's not a racial difference in intelligence, if you want to instead say that it is a cultural difference in understanding and prioritization, the end result is the same. Resources sitting there that aren't even benefiting the people that live there. Getting back to the opener, you remember what was the very first quote from Thomas Sowell? Ironically enough, a black man. Activism is a way to make useless people feel important, even if the consequences of their activism are counterproductive to those that they claim to be helping and damaging to the fabric of society as a whole. Rhodesia, South Africa, all of the activism there, counterproductive to the people that they thought that they were trying to help. Because as soon as they ran the European powers out of Rhodesia, as soon as they pulled Western and European support out of South Africa because of apartheid, what happened? Oh, it was a golden era. Wakanda made manifest. Everyone lived in cities of gold. No, they went in, they butchered white farmers, they put joker cuts on 6-year-old kids. The level of brutality had scarcely been seen in the entire history of the world, even for that region. And now those same resources sit in the ground, untapped and unused. And one guess who they blame. No good deed goes unpunished. In any case, civil war. Those are some possible scenarios. Those are some ways that it could break down. And good on them. I'm hearing now that, in fact, I just saw this thing cross through my feed, that the leftists are arming themselves and standing guard against ICE. Good on them. Let me establish something. Let me establish something very, very quickly and irrevocably and unequivocally, that's my college word. I got like 3 of those. Without equivocation or apology, it is absolutely the right of every leftist maggot in the state of Minnesota, and particularly in the city of Minneapolis, to carry a firearm. Period, full stop. Every single leftist maggot in the city of Minneapolis has an undeniable right to carry whatever firearm of his choosing in any manner that he sees fit to any public demonstration that he sees fit to participate in. Period. When I say absolutist about the Second Amendment, I mean it. Caveat: if you come in aggressively, then you can expect an aggressive response. You strap an AR-15 across your chest and walk down a public thoroughfare and say, "This is our neighborhood, F ICE, F the feds, F Trump." Absolutely, you're right. You wave that rifle at an agent trying to enforce existing federal law, you will be shot down, bled out in the streets unceremoniously, and you will absolutely deserve it. Your right to swing your fist ends at my face. Your right to carry that gun, again, the whole reason the Second Amendment exists is to respond to an out-of-control government, for people to protect themselves against government tyranny. If the leftists in Minneapolis feel that they have no further recourse than to take up arms, that is their absolute right to do. 100% full stop. If you feel you have no recourse, take it to the streets. Take up arms, do what you feel like you have to do. But if, in the course of that, you find yourself assuming room temperature, you do not have the right to complain. There will be no wailing and moaning and gnashing of teeth. You brought it on yourself. Again, when people try to draw the false equivalencies between my support for the Weaver family at Ruby Ridge and my support for the Branch Davidians at Waco and the people in Minneapolis, particularly when it comes to taking up arms, the people at Ruby Ridge were doing their best to remove themselves from society. The people at Waco lived far away from everyone else and just wanted to be left alone. They took up arms in defense of those principles. If the principle that you are taking up arms in defense against is actively seeking conflict with federal agents enforcing legitimate federal law, you can expect the exact response that you are going to get. You're taking it to them. They are not taking it to you. I don't know why I'm even bringing this up, because everybody here already feels the same way. And anybody who's watching that doesn't will never get it. So it's absolutely pointless for me to even discuss this. Half the time I think I just do this for my own amusement. I don't know. Clem Weaver, he didn't get a full pardon recently. No, that was actually shortly after the case. They wound up dropping. In fact, his daughter Sarah was one of the most important people in bringing me back to the faith. She is a wonderful woman, wonderful human being. After the tragic events at Ruby Ridge, her dad, Randy, wound up being acquitted of all charges except for the original weapons violation. So basically half of a family got bled out and murdered because somebody's shotgun barrel was too short. They dropped all of the charges except the weapons charge. And they were paid a settlement. I'll leave it there. They were paid a considerable settlement. Thank God for a man by the name of Jerry Spence. Jerry Spence took the case on pro bono. God bless him. Fellow that practices law in one of those old leather jackets with the fringe on it, you know. One of the most brilliant men of God that you'll ever hear. Sorry, guys. That was a little personal for me. Why do I bring up the Balkans? To give me an excuse to remind you of this one fellow right here when it comes to the Balkans. If you're wondering how things are going to break down in an American Civil War, okay? As I said, the most likely scenario is going to be a lot like what happened in the former Yugoslavia. It's going to be the Balkan conflict. And bearing that in mind, this is a fellow whose name you should write down. Selko Begovic, or just Selko, as he's known in the prepper community. He survived the Balkan conflict. Oh, wow, there's like a 10-second limit on that now. Wow, that's crazy. Okay, yeah, Selko Begovic. Write that down. Pause it if you have to, whatever. He had his own website, continues to have his own blog. He is featured in a number of podcasts, in interview with people. He still teaches classes for preppers. His experiences are going to be very, very relatable when you think in terms of how this is going to play out. So I've got a theory for you. Oh, yeah, you're on to Selco. I figured you would be, brother. I figured you would be. Yeah, Joey, that's why you're the Sultan of Sarcasm, buddy. I'm glad you're here. See if you guys notice something. Have you noticed there seem to be two kinds of operators? And I'm gonna pass through this one time and I'm gonna let it go. So, like the old hee-haw thing, you'll never hear one of us repeating gossip, so you better be sure and listen close the first time. Okay. Have you noticed there seems to be a division in the ICE officers on the ground? When we first heard, it was like, oh, well, these guys are rookies. These guys don't know what the hell they're doing, just a bunch of rejects, and they never would have originally gotten through the program. And, you know, we got them out there enforcing the law, and they've got no business on. And then you've got some that I've noticed that look like that. And then you've got some that I've noticed that are dialed in, that are 100% kitted out, that are always masked. They work as a team. They move as a team. Very professional in the execution of their movements. They don't go during the day. They go in the early morning hours before these maggot protesters are even up. They go in, they extract their target, and they get the hell out. And they move like pros when you watch them. It's like poetry. Now, when I looked at that, my first thought was, looks like ICE has really stepped up their game. I guess all the stuff we heard about rookies was BS. These guys are really moving like pros. Then it occurred to me, what if, because these guys are generally kitted out, but there's not very much identifiable insignia, what if, let's just say, that what's actually going on in Minnesota, as I went over in the opener, is deeper than any of the public's being made aware of? What were the things that I went over in the opener? The FBI knows that there are more terrorist investigations that came out of Ilhan Omar's district, and this is going all the way back to like whenever she first got elected. More terrorist investigations come out of Somali mosque in her district than any other congressional district in the United States, and it's been that way for years. Now you have all of this fraud and funding. The Democratic politicians are definitely up to their balls in. And we have proof that this money is being rolled out in suitcases and being taken back to Somalia to serve the interests of al-Shabaab. Remember earlier when I was going over the 4 years of open borders and all of the sleeper cells that we know are here, but we don't know where they are? Maybe we do. That perhaps all of this conflict that you're seeing in the streets and all the shrieking and yelling and all of this, and we've seen several cases where ICE agents will drive and draw attention to themselves. Dennis even pointed this out once in one instance where they drive down here and draw all the attention to themselves, but the actual operation is taking place like 3 blocks over. You put the rookies up front. You let them get hit with the water bottles. You let them get honked at with the bullhorns. You let them get those shrill ass whistles. You let them with the crazy white women. What if what we're seeing there isn't about? What if what we're seeing there isn't about immigration? Or isn't just about immigration? What if what we're seeing there is that we already have military and law enforcement counterterrorism squads in place, and that, as we already know, Somalian mosques are a prime recruiting ground, that there are entire warehouses and strip centers up there that are being funded by the Minnesota and the American taxpayer, that what is actually being conducted over everybody's nose is they are tracking down and eliminating sleeper cells. Sure, they're rounding up the sex offenders. Sure, they're rounding up the rapists and the murderers and every other filthy, horrible thing that is the majority of Somali men. But what if the pros that we see moving around are doing something much more important? Just a theory, something to work with. What I can tell you with certainty is that there are sleeper cells in the United States, that 4 years of open borders compounded that problem, made it exceedingly difficult to bring back under control, and that for all the yelling and screaming and shrieking that the American public is doing right now over the enforcement measures that are necessary, do you understand? Necessary. That if these operations were not taking place, that sooner or later there will be a day where we wake up and the Mall of America went boom. That we wake up and a bridge or a power station went boom. That we wake up and a group of Somali Muslims with AK-47s and IQs hovering just below functionally retarded went into an American Christian church and shot the place up. I wonder if they'll have the stomach for it then. This is an admonition that I'm throwing out to the American people. You voted for this. A plurality of the American public said that they wanted all illegal immigrants out, 50-odd%. A supermajority, 78 to 82%, depending on which study or which poll, 78 to 82% said that they wanted illegal alien criminals out of the country. That is what they voted for. A word, Sparky. How did you expect that was going to happen? It would have been difficult enough to pull that off if you would have had the support of the legacy media, as every prior president who deported twice as many had. But not only do you not have the support and the cover of the media, but the media and the other politicians are actively encouraging the American people to push back. So now they have, by default, made these measures necessary. If this regime, if this administration, if this administration exceeds constitutional bounds, then we have an issue. So far, they have not, except in the eyes of some leftist judges that keep getting overruled. You cannot remove violent criminals from the United States without violent measures. If you did not have the stomach for this, you should not have voted for it. You don't get to say, I want bad man, go bye-bye. And then when dad comes in and snatches bad man and makes him go bye-bye, you go, you didn't have to be so mean. When you are dealing with rapists, murderers, child sex offenders, the Constitution is a polite suggestion as far as I'm concerned. I'd prefer you stay within the bounds of that. But I've said it before, and I will not back off of this. I am down for the survival of the United States as a nation and of Western civilization as an entity. You guys remember No Country for Old Men? Anton Chigurh sitting across from Woody Harrelson's character, that silencer on the shotgun. If the rule you followed brought you to this, of what good was the rule? Spare me the scenarios. Could it get to a point where we're legitimately looking at an authoritarian police state? Yes. But we're not even close. Spare me. Freaking spare me. Not even close. Not the same ballpark, not even the same freaking sport. Stop. You're embarrassing yourself. This just came across my feed, another one. I don't know if you guys are able to hear. Tell me in the comments if you can hear that audio. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Anybody hear that? Tell me in the comments if you could hear that audio or not. Couldn't hear it? Sorry about that. That was the yelling and shouting. Apparently, see, I don't know why it does that, because it's coming through the same speaker, right? It's the same speaker that I play the bumper music through, but for whatever reason, when I play other audio, it just doesn't. It doesn't come through for whatever reason. Whatever, doesn't matter. What it was Don Lemon leading a group of protester maggots into a church in Minneapolis. Well, they finally found out why they busted into the church. One of the members of the church was an ICE agent. A member of the church. So they went in and started busting the place up. There are plenty of constitutional arguments. I will not hear it from the likes of them. The Constitution means nothing to these people. It should mean something to us. Under ordinary circumstances, it does. And will continue to. But the further we go down this pipeline, the less of a concern it becomes for me. Because you cannot engage in a fight based on principle against an unprincipled opponent. And principles are anathema to the entire existence of this maggot militia. As all part of this unholy alliance, they use our very principles against us. The principles of free speech they use to spread the Islamic doctrine. The principles of freedom of religion, you can't have a look in our mosque. You're going to stand in my face and say the document that gives me free speech, I am going to use to say that the people that wrote that document are horrible people. Oh, I live in a country with freedom of speech? Cool. Screw this country. That's how it goes. I get it. It's one of the failings of this constitutional republic. The founders couldn't have anticipated this. Why? Because we were founded as a Western nation with Western ideals and white European blood. I revere the Constitution. I am loath to even dance up to the line of stepping over. But we do ourselves a disservice if we don't realize that the people that we are in opposition with here do not hold the same reverence for the document, nor the principles, nor the powers, nor the nation, nor the prospect. We continue to fight with one hand tied behind our back. We continue to stick, getting back to the no country for old men thing. If the rule that you followed has led you here, of what good was the rule? The rule that we have followed has enabled these maggots to get a foothold. And they will continue to bleed it for everything that it's worth. They use our principles against us to push the limits of the law, and then turn our sympathies against us. Don't you care about the children? I certainly do. Why the hell did you bring a child to a demonstration that you knew was going to erupt into violence? It's the same human shield thing that we see in Gaza. They put their missiles inside a hospital complex or inside a school where children are. And then when you launch a counterstrike and children get killed, they hold up the dead body of the child and go, look. It's unfortunate, people, but sooner or later you are going to have to come to grips with the nature of the enemy that we're facing. And you had better damn well come to grips with the consequences if they are allowed to win. Because if you think any of our constitutional freedoms and protections are going to survive under leftist rule, under Marxist rule, or God forbid, under Islamic Sharia law, it's not a sacrifice that I'm willing to make. You can feel about me however you want. But if the choice is 100% sticking to the Constitution, and Dennis, you bring up a good point. If we're going to be accused of shredding the Constitution anyway, what keeps us from at least bending it to get the peace? It's harder and harder to answer that question. I absolutely agree. By the way, I love this hostile side of you that I'm seeing come out, man. It kind of scared me a little bit, but I like it. Here's the thing, Dennis, you're absolutely right. Somebody brought this up, and I wish I had the tweet like loaded so I could just pull it up. But basically, it said the choice comes down to this: we can preserve our way of life and Western traditions and be called Nazis, or we can lose everything and still be called Nazis. Either way, they're going to say that we are fascists. Either way, they're going to say that we have egregiously exceeded. They're going to call us fascist bigots. It doesn't matter. And you could feel about this however you want. If you truly know me, you know how precise the line is with what I'm talking about. If a constitutional principle has to be momentarily abandoned to keep from losing the whole freaking document, I'm here for it. My priorities: faith, blood, civilization. My walk with the boss man and the carpenter above everything else. Blood, my people, my tribe. The founding principles of Western civilization immediately under that. Everything else. Roman, yes, absolutely. Nationalist first, constitutionalist second. Completely agree. People can feel about that however they want. I don't care anymore. I don't care anymore. There's too much at stake. You want to nitpick, you want to do the intellectual masturbation, you go right on ahead, Sparky. Do it on your own time with your own hand. I don't have time for this right now. I don't. That's the long and the short of it. Now, I'm interested to see that. Just came across my feed here for a second. What do we got? So I went over the different scenarios. We went over some things that you might not have noticed about that. I got a couple more bullet points to cover, and we'll make it quick. Speaking of, with regard to that, numbers versus narrative. What have we heard? Well, they're sweeping up U.S. citizens, man. What about the U.S. citizens? That's what you say you always care about, man. It's the U.S. citizens, man. Now we got U.S. citizens being held. Okay. So I did some digging. ProPublica released a study, and here's what they found as of October the 16th of last year. Now, you're going to have some more up-to-date figures, and anybody who wants to do that digging and bring it back to me, but the one that they keep trumping on, 100, and so this is ProPublica, 170 U.S. citizens have been held by immigration agents, okay? And here's what they found out of that 170. Steven Crowder actually inspired me to go look for this. I run hot and cold on Crowder, but he's been pretty on point with this issue. Immigration enforcement is a PSYOP. Right, PSYOP with crisis actors. We can have that discussion another time, John. Thanks for showing up, by the way. No, I think it is a PSYOP, but I went into some of the reasons for that earlier, and you missed it. In any case, 170 U.S. citizens detained. Less than 200. Out of those 170, 78%, 72%. 72% were detained because they actively interfered with ICE enforcing the law. The other 28% were detained because they couldn't, they couldn't figure out their ID, they couldn't figure out, their documentation, whatever. They were held and then released. So, less than 200 U.S. citizens detained, none of them deported, and 72% of those were held for actively interfering. So there's that. We want to talk about numbers. And the last thing that I want to address is a little comment that a couple of people made, and this came up in conversation. They want the left to react exactly the way they are because it justifies ramping up enforcement on all levels. Yes, John, that is part of it. That is part of it. And then the flip side of that is you have the people on the left that want it to escalate because then it justifies their end of things of being able to go fascist. See, told you they were a fascist. So yeah, man, some days there aren't enough use to go around, and this is one of those situations. But again, it's a conversation that you and I can have on our own time, and maybe we will once I get through with the sermon right here. But this is what I want to throw out. Joe Rogan. Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to? Now, the same CNN that belittled Joe Rogan and have never had a kind word to say about the man and changed the coloration of his face, on camera when he did hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin for his COVID infections and all this. They despised the man. They took this quote and they took it out of context. And some of my conservative friends got pissed off at Joe for what he said. Oh, we're really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to? What they didn't leave out was the 60 seconds before and the 60 seconds after, where he said, I see both sides of the equation. And you guys need to look that up and look up the entire quote. Joe is a sharp guy. He can be on the wrong side of things sometimes, but the man is far from being an idiot. All right. He vocalized seeing both sides of the equation and went and made both cases at length. And CNN isolated that one little soundbite. What, are really going to be the Gestapo? So they could go, see, even their boy Rogan's calling it the Gestapo. Okay, that's first. Second of all, a lot of conservatives jump on the bandwagon saying about the comments from Kristi Noem this week. Okay. The comment that she made about people having their IDs on them, right? Immediately, everyone jumped to confusions on that. And even some of my conservative friends were basically like, we're basically like, see, he's turning around on us now. He is a dictator. He's just like all the rest of them. Let me clear something up for you, Sparky. You need to go back and actually look at what was said, okay? And again, I want to play this audio not coming through again. Okay, and if you could have heard that, you would have heard that, first of all, she didn't volunteer that statement. She was asked directly by a reporter, why are people being asked to provide ID in the city of Minneapolis during these ICE operations? Why is it required that people carry ID around, right? Are you going to make people carry IDs around? And her response to that, again, you've got to look up the whole thing in context. In every situation, we are doing targeted enforcement. If we are on a target and doing an operation, there may be individuals surrounding that criminal while they're there and having them validate their identity. This hasn't changed the rule of engagement at all. Nothing. This is not, oh, well, now we're the Gestapo. Papers, please. Papier bita. No, it is not that. And if you know me at all, you know that I would be the first to call it out if it had come to that. I'm just going to read this verbatim. This was the response that I had to somebody on a public thread. I'm going to read this aloud, and that's going to be the end of it. I may jump around a bit. Not what she said, totally decontextualized to get, well, the exact effect that it's having. This is not Stasi checkpoints. This isn't the NKVD. This isn't Papier Bita. This isn't any of those things. This is, if you're deliberately interfering with a legitimate law enforcement operation and we can't ID you, we're not turning you loose until we can. Nothing more. And specious suggestions that routine identification procedures puts us into police state territory are disingenuous at best. Let the bootlicker accusations commence. If you know me, you know my character. If you don't, I owe you neither explanation nor apology. If I legit believed that the U.S. government or any department thereof had legit gone to war with U.S. citizens, I'd be the first to call it out and oppose it by whatever means expedient to the appropriate level of resistance and opposition. I still reserve the right to do that. And we may very well still get there. But as it stands, speaking strictly on statute and precedent, not optics, there were more numerous and more egregious excesses of constitutional violations under the COVID lockdowns and vaccination policies than what's going on now in Minnesota. There's been no legitimate constitutional overreach by the DOJ in enforcing existing law here. None. In fact, in terms of straight numbers, we've seized and deported about a third of what was done under Biden by this point and Obama at any point. There's been no change in rules of engagement, no change in rules of detention, nothing. The propaganda ministry has exceeded all expectations in ginning up the public outrage. A lot of people are going to get hurt and killed, and unnecessarily so. But on a purely legal and constitutional level, as of this post, there's nothing. Absolutely nothing going on here that doesn't have a legal, historical, and a constitutional precedent. The moral question here is entirely subjective. But as of now, we have not shifted gears into V for Vendetta territory. When and if that shift happens, pass me a tri-cornered hat and a Gadsden flag, and you guys go grab some tar and some feathers. I am not closed-minded about this, and I'm way open to be persuaded otherwise if someone wants to make the case. There is every possibility that I'm wrong. I'm just calling it like I see it, guys, and only in the moment, as this is a dynamic situation that continues to evolve and develop every single minute. Regardless of what impression of me that leaves you with, I am not naive. I am not a Trump cultist. I am not a pacifist. And rest assured that if I'm licking a boot, there's a dominatrix involved and not a bureaucrat. I'll even live stream it on the Reverend Bart YouTube channel, so keep your eye out. I'll be the one dressed as a humongous from Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, and with any luck, the Dom will be a blue-eyed redhead dressed as Ani Entity from Beyond Thunderdome. Not that I've given this any thought. That was my response. That remains my response. And a pretty damn good rant, if I may puff my own pecker and pat myself on the back for a minute. Guys, we could still get to territory where we go full bore dystopian, where we go full bore Third Reich. And I would have the same energy for that as I did for the push to go Mao's Great Leap Forward. Nobody can keep that energy when the other team is the one in the crosshairs or the one with their hand on the switch. We all have our loyalties. We all have our biases, myself included. The difference is I wear mine on my sleeve and other parts of my anatomy. The rest will lie straight to your face and say that they're being objective. There's no such thing. Not to snatch from a Rush lyric, but if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. There is no fence sitting in a polarized moment. You will choose your alliances, or your alliances will be chosen for you. I choose to align myself with the people that I know to be of solid moral character, that I know to be men of faith, or at least men of moral fabric. Anyone who stands on the side of what is good and righteous, I will die and bleed out standing right beside you when the day comes. I don't care if you are Asatru, Christian, Mormon, Catholic, or pasta freaking Farian. You can commit your soul to a flying spaghetti monster, but if you'll stand in the face of anyone who wants to hurt a child, I will embrace you like a brother and we will walk right into the maelstrom together. But trying to straddle a fence in this day and age, not going to happen. And I'll give you another little historical truth here. I hear it said very often, just wait to the people who don't want to be. Let me start that again. I hear it all the time. Let's square this up because I want to make sure I'm abundantly clear here. I often hear, just wait to the people who only wanted to be left alone get involved. There's a lot of truth to that. The people that just wanted to be left alone, when they get involved, it's no holds barred because they have nothing left to lose. But in the greater historical perspective, The people who just want to be left alone always lose to the people who have the fire of their cause motivating them. So for you who just want to be left alone, now is the time to find your fire and your cause and your righteousness. History will make no other allowance. I am the Reverend. That is the gospel. God bless you all. I appreciate you being here. I'm going to close with a prayer, just real quick. Heavenly Father, in the spirit of what we were discussing, I want you to help all of my brothers and sisters gathered here to find that fire. The other side has the full demonic fire of hell behind them. They have set their sights on where they are going, and they are hell-bent on the destruction of the West and the destruction of Christendom. And you have people over here that are yet to accept that fact. They don't want to fight. That's noble. They don't want to engage in violence if they can avoid it. I get that, Lord, but you have to. Please, Lord, I'm begging you to help these people come to the realization that they need to find that fire, because the other side is literally hell-bent on their destruction, and they absolutely will not stop. For those of us who have already found that fire, Lord, give us the strength and the courage to step into the maelstrom, to step into the breach, and to do what is required of us by the Scripture and for the kingdom. In the mighty name of Jesus, amen. Before we get out of here, I got one more thing, guys, one more thing, because I nearly jumped past the most important element here. For those of you guys who have yet to find your fire and you're wondering because you're still maybe leaning too much into that hippie Jesus, has it really come to it? I'm going to drop the scriptures because we drop the Bible verse every week now. I'm going to drop this on you. Got just a couple of them, and I'll leave you with this. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 11 and 12. Have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. For it is a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret. So when you're looking to find your fire, people, when you're wondering what God would say about how you're feeling, about looking at all this evil that's going on in the world and finding your spine and letting your balls drop and taking your stand against it, take a look at that book. Take a look at that passage from Ephesians, or you could have a look at this one from 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. But these, as natural brute beasts, made to be taken and destroyed, speak evil of the things that they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption, and shall receive the reward of unrighteousness, as they that count it pleasure to riot in the daytime. Ooh, that was close to home. Spots they are and blemishes, sporting themselves with their own deceivings while they feast with you. Are you tracking? They'll speak all the right words to say that, can't we all just get along? Can't we agree to disagree? And you, being a principled and peaceful person, maybe you're sitting back thinking, man, if I can just compromise a little bit, if I can just bend a little bit, if I could just reach out a little bit. No, we're past that. God doesn't expect that of you, and in fact, quite the opposite. Make no peace with evil. Destroy it. Deus Vult and Amen. I appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to pass that digital collection plate around, guys. You already know the drill. I am on PayPal, Cash App, all the other stuff, Venmo, yada, yada, yada. I'm on all that stuff. I don't even know how to work half of it. But yeah, if you guys want to kick something down, that would be outstanding. I appreciate it. Go get some music to go out on. Little shot of Clutch, Neil Fallon, Fortunate Son, the best cover of that tune that's ever been done. And you're free to disagree, but you'd be wrong. In any case, guys, if you want to kick something down, man, digital collection plate is there. You can drop me a coin or something. If you can't or you're not so inclined, that's okay too. What I would ask you to do is, if you've got a Facebook page or a Twitter feed or something, share the sermon. Get it out there, man. Help us get that gospel out, spread the reach, and we can reach some more people and build that community a little bit bigger. But here's what you can do, not just for me, but especially for yourselves, independent of everything else. If Stone were here, he'd tell you, hashtag live the three, baby. Live the three. Live the three. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the three prime directives. Rules to live by on planet Bart. Rule number 1. Signal and noise. You've got to be the signal in a world full of noise. What is the noise? The noise is all the distractions, all the lies, all the obfuscations, all the things they'll throw in to deliberately confuse you. The signal is the truth. You've got to punch that signal through the noise and get the truth to those willing ears for the sake of yourself, for the sake of the kingdom. Rule number 2, you got to be light in a world full of darkness, and boy, they love that darkness. They will try to bury you with the darkness, smother you with it, demoralize you, dehumanize you, emasculate you with the darkness. You have got to be the light that punches through that darkness, punches through the fog, and you got to be able to carry that light through the fog, which brings you to the third rule, our final rule, the prime directive, the iron rule. I'm talking about being strength in a world full of weakness. And I don't just mean strength. Yeah, that's all good. It's good to have it here, but it can't just be here. It's got to be here. It's got to be here. And it's damn sure got to be here. Fellas, find your spine. Let your balls drop. Why is strength so important? Because without strength, none of the rest of it matters, man. Without strength, you won't have the tenacity to punch that signal through the noise. Without strength, you won't have the endurance to carry that light through a long-lasting darkness. What's the Bruce Lee flick? What is that line? Who knows what beauty has died out of the world for want of the strength to survive? Yeah? So you got to be that strength. That's the prime directive. Strength, man. When you hit your knees at night, you pray for that strength. And you better be hitting your knees while you're praying for that strength. You pray for clarity and discernment. Because no matter how strong you are, Father of Lies is always there trying to trip you up. Obfuscating, confusing. You got to have clarity and discernment. Pray for that. Put your face in some scripture and your ass under some iron, and I promise you, your world is going to be a better place. Boss man's got the plan. Carpenter's got your back. Let the Spirit work through you. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. God bless you all. I love you. See you next Sunday. God willing. Stay strong. Peace.